All right, let's dive into one of the most famous and, let's be honest, controversial numbers ever pulled from the pages of the Bible. It's just one single date, but wow, has it fueled debates for centuries.
There it is, 4404 BC. For a lot of people, that's it. That's the year the world was created, if you take a very literal reading of the biblical timeline. I mean, it's so specific, right? It just feels authoritative. But where did this number even come from?
Well, it comes from a guy named Archbishop James Ussher. He was this brilliant scholar back in the 1650s. And what he did was he painstakingly added up all the ages, all the lifespans, everything he could find in the biblical genealogies. And you know what? His calculation got so famous that by the 1700s, they were actually printing it in the margins of King James Bibles. But here's the thing. His whole method rested on one giant assumption.
See, he assumed that these genealogies were meant to be used like a calculator, a complete, totally gapless, chronological record of history. But does that assumption actually hold up to scrutiny? That's what we're going to find out. And we're going to do it by looking at what biblical scholars themselves have been saying for, well, over 100 years now.
So this really brings us to the core question. What was the purpose of these lists in the first place? Were they meant to be a stopwatch for history, or were they for something else entirely?
And here's the heart of the issue, really. We today are obsessed with precise chronology. For us, history is a timeline of exact dates. But for the ancient world, genealogies often had a totally different job. Their main goal wasn't about measuring time. It was about establishing a clear, unbroken line of descent. It was about proving your heritage.
And look, this isn't some new, radical idea. We're talking over 100 years ago, influential theologians like B.B. Warfield were already waving a red flag about this. He basically said that trying to build a timeline from these family trees was, and I quote, a precarious business. Why? Because they just weren't built for that job. So, okay, let's actually look at the evidence.
Okay, first up, we have to talk about the original language. You know how much can get lost in translation, right? Well, in this case, the real meaning of just a couple of key Hebrew words changes everything.
Let's start with the word son. Simple enough, right? For us, it means your immediate first-generation male kid. But in biblical Hebrew, the word is way more flexible. It could mean son, sure, but it could also mean grandson, great-grandson, or really any male descendant no matter how far down the line.
And it's the exact same story for the word beget. We hear that and think direct fatherhood. But in the text, it often just means to become the ancestor of. It's about establishing a link in the family tree, but it doesn't necessarily tell you if it's a direct father-son link.
I mean, think about a super famous example. The New Testament kicks off by calling Jesus the son of David. Now, nobody, and I mean nobody, reads that and thinks King David was his literal dad. We all just get it. It means descendant of David. And that right there shows you exactly how these terms were used. They were all about connecting key people in a line of heritage, not about counting the years in between. So this flexible language leads us right to the second big piece of evidence. The fact that these genealogies, well, they often skip generations, and they do it on purpose. Actually, a lot of scholars would argue that abridgment, shortening the list, is the rule, not the exception. The point was never to list every single person who ever lived. The point was to connect point A to point B to show a clear, unbroken, legitimate line of descent. And let me show you a really stunning example of how this works.
Okay, check this out. In the book of 1 Chronicles, there's a guy named Shebuel, and the text calls him the son of Gershom, the son of Moses. Simple enough. That makes Shebuel the grandson of Moses, right? But hold on. We know from other places that Gershom was Moses' immediate first-generation son. That's a fact. But Shebuel was an official who served under King David. And King David lived about 400 years after Moses. So you've got this supposed grandfather and grandson with a 4-century gap between them. 400 years! And here's the crucial thing. This isn't a mistake or a contradiction. This is a perfect example of how these genealogies were designed to work. The writer's goal wasn't to create a calendar. It was to prove that Shebuel had this direct, noble lineage straight back to Moses. The word son is literally being used to bridge centuries of time. So, all of this leads to the big question, right? If the names and numbers and the Genesis genealogies aren't there for us to do math with, then what are they for?
What about those incredibly long lifespans, like Methuselah, living to be 969? Well, those probably weren't meant to be data points for a spreadsheet. Instead, scholars like Warfield suggest they were symbolic. They were meant to paint a picture of a kind of mythic, epic past, a bigger and grander humanity, as he put it, living back in the dawn of the world.
So what's the big takeaway here? It's that the genealogies in Genesis had a really profound theological purpose. Their job was to trace that sacred family line all the way from Adam down to Abraham, connecting all the key players in the covenant story. They were built to be a family tree, to establish heritage, not to be a stopwatch.
And that really reframes the whole debate, doesn't it? The conflict that we see between a 6,000-year-old Earth and modern science, maybe it doesn't come from the Bible at all. Maybe it comes from us, in our modern world, trying to force this ancient text to answer a question it was never even asking. And that kind of leaves you wondering, if that's what happened here, what else might we understand in a whole new light just by taking a closer look at what the text was originally trying to do?